Okay, welcome back to another fun-filled edition of math. Here in this video, I wanted to look at the basics behind solving linear equations that are in this form here. So we're talking about x plus b equals c, where b and c are usually going to be numbers or coefficients, or the form ax equals c, again where a and c represent numbers. We have some vocab that you need to keep in mind when talking about linear equations. So first of all, it's specifically what even is an equation. So we talk about an equation as being a mathematical line with an equal sign and a variable. In other words, it's a mathematical sentence where you have to solve for a variable and be able to figure out what its result is. The solution then would be the value that the variable is, which would make your equation true or make your equation equal. Equivalent equations are two or more equations that are actually the same. So whether it's you've reduced them down or you've multiplied them up, but at the end of the day, they're the same equation. Now, a linear equation is essentially a straight line. It's an equation that has a power of 1. It's also an equation that usually has a single variable, or that at least none of the variables have any powers greater than 1. There's a few easy steps that can be used in order to solve linear equations. Linear typically has one solution. Therefore, there should only be one answer that you can find that variable to be. That would make your equation work. The easiest steps to follow are the following. First, we want to take any constants that are on the side with the variable, and we want to move them across the equal sign. Then we want to look to see if we can combine any like terms. And last, we want to be able to isolate that variable to figure out what it equals, thus solving for it. So essentially what I just have here is I have a bunch of different types of examples of all different forms, and we'll look at each one and how to actually approach solving that equation. So first and foremost, I have x plus 15 equals negative 4. So very simply, what I have to do is I have to take this positive 15 and I have to move it across the equal sign to the other side. Because the 15 is positive, the only way to move it is by doing subtraction. This means I have that x is equal to negative 4 minus 15. On this side, I actually have to do the math, meaning I need to actually subtract. So we find our answer to be negative 19. Since x is completely by itself, there's nothing else for me to do, and thus this problem is finished. If you look at the other side, you can see that here I also have this negative 15. And I have to move it in order to isolate my variable. My 15 in this case is negative, which means the only way to move it says I have to add. Therefore, I have negative 22 plus 15 gives me my variable n. Again, just like before, I have to do the math. Therefore, I've got that negative 7 is equal to n. Since my variable is all by itself, there's nothing else to do, and thus that problem is solved. In looking at this next problem down here, I have 4y equals negative 32. I have to isolate my y, and in this case the only way to do that is to divide by 4. Whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other. Dividing by 4 says that the 4 is going to go away, And then on the other side, negative 32 over 4 is going to give me a negative 8. Since my y is by itself, that's all I have to do. Now this next one, this one has to be solved using two steps. First and foremost, we need to get the denominator out of the equation. The easiest way to do that is to go ahead and multiply the entire equation here by that denominator term of 4. In doing that, the 4 is going to go away on this side and leave behind my negative 3x. And then on this side, I'm going to have negative 15 times 4. Now here, before I move on any further, it's a good idea to do the math. Therefore, I have that negative 3x is equal to negative 60. I still have to get x by itself, so I have to divide by the negative 3 on both sides. That means my 3 goes away, leaves me with x. Negative over negative becomes positive. 60 over 3 is 20. Again, the x is totally by itself. Therefore, I have nothing else to do with that problem. So now let's start to look at examples where you have more than one step in order to work with. So first off, fractions. I have this 2/7 here. The easiest thing to do is to treat this 2/7 like we did any whole number and move it to the other side of my equation. Because it is subtracted, in order to move it, I have to add to both sides. So my variable n is going to be equal to 3 over 14 plus 2 over 7. Now in order to combine your fractions, you need to have a least common denominator. The least common denominator is the most common term or number between your two denominators that you have. It will never be the smallest number, but it could potentially be the biggest. Now if you look at what's in common between 7 and 14, the obvious choice is 14. Therefore, the least common denominator is 14. So when we are solving, my first fraction stays the way it is. I'm still adding. How do I change 7 to 14? I have to multiply by 2. Therefore, that's what I have to do on top. So this is 2 times 2 over my 14. So here I have my 3 over 14 plus 4 over 14 is going to become 7 over 14. And we always have to remember to reduce. From top and bottom, we can divide out the 7, which leaves me with 1/2. Therefore, there's nothing else to do, and that is your answer. So notice this problem here had considerably more steps than the other problems we looked at, but it is still a linear equation. My next one, I have common terms. So I have 7x minus 6x. So I need to combine these before I do anything else. 7 minus 6 just simply gives me x, and that's 13 minus 15. The next thing I need to do is combine these. So here 13 minus 15 is going to give me that x is negative 2. Since x is totally by itself, that's all you have to do with that one. Decimals is going to be no different. You still have to combine your terms and then solve for y. So in this case, I have 1.7 and 1.3. Now, you could very easily pull out a calculator and do that. However, as a refresher, if you were to set up your decimals vertically, you could add them with no big deal. Now remember, the rule for decimals says you line up your decimal points and then that's where it goes the whole time. And then you do vertical math. So you look at your ones column or your tenths column. So 7 plus 3 is 10. So you input your 0 you carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, and thus we're looking at 3.0. So here you would have 3.0 y is equal to 6.3, and division would be the same. And so here we would have to divide out your 3, and so here y is going to be 6.3 divided by 3.0. And so you could do long division, or again, if you had a calculator, you could go ahead and use that. And when you do, you're going to find out that y is 2.1. Now again, as a refresher, long division says you put the funky sign, whatever was on top goes inside, so this is 6.3, and whatever is on the bottom goes on the outside, 3.0. Now whenever we're dealing with decimals in terms of your division, your decimal, what we like to do is we like to move it so that we deal with whole numbers. Well, in order to do that, I have to move both of them once. In doing so, that changes this to being 30 goes into 63. 30 goes into 60 twice. Subtract your 60, leaves you with 3. And then this is where we would input a decimal. You put a 0 in, so we would carry it down. 30 goes into 30 once. Now since I had to put this 0 here, that means the decimal point comes straight back up, and look, 2.1 is what we got. Okay. Now if we look at this next one, you can see that first I have to combine these terms. And we'll do just that. So 3n minus 2n gives you n plus 6 equals 14. And then the next thing that I have to do is I have to take this 6 and I have to move it across my equal sign. Since it is being added, in order to move it, says that I have to subtract. So this is going to end up being that n equals 14 minus 6. Physically do the math, and you get that n is 9. So now for the challenging ones. For this first one, notice all 4 of them are fractions. So when we first start out, the easiest thing to do is to find a common denominator across all of them. Your goal is to get rid of the fractions so you just have a linear to work with. So my least common denominator here is going to be 8. Now the reason we know that is because we have a 4, an 8, and a 2. And if you look at all of those, all of them will go into 8 nicely. So what you want to do is you want to multiply your entire equation by that least common denominator and cancel out your denominators as you go. So here we have 8 and 4. Now that's going to reduce down and be a 2. So this is 2 times a 7x. Then I have another 8 and 4, so minus 2 times a 3x. 8 and 8 is going to reduce out completely, so this is plus 7. 8 and 2 become a 4, so this is 4 times my negative 3. If you do or notice, all of your fractions have gone away and left us with just a nice, pretty little linear line. We have to keep doing the math. 2 times 7 here is going to give me a 14x. Negative 2 times 3 is a negative 6x. And then we have that plus 7 is equal to a negative 12. We need to combine our terms, so we're going to look at these two first and we're going to combine them. So we have 14 minus 6, that's going to give you an 8x plus 7 equals negative 12. Then I need to take this 7 and I need to move it to the other side. It is positive, so to move it says that I have to subtract. Therefore I have 8x equals negative 12 minus 7. Do the math, gives me 8x equals negative 19. And then the last thing I have to do is divide both sides by that 8 to get x all by itself. So we're going to find out that our solution here is going to be negative 19 over 8. Now the last one I wanted to show you is not quite as extensive, but again I still have these fractions here. Therefore, I'm going to have to find a common denominator. The first thing I want to do, however, is I want to combine my terms. So here I have a 6x minus 5x. That's going to leave me with x plus your 3/4 equals negative 1/12. I'm going to take this 3/4 fraction and I'm going to move it. It is positive, so again to move it says I have to subtract. In subtracting, I'm going to have to be able to find a common denominator. So here I'm going to have x is equal to negative 1/12 minus 3/4. When I'm talking about a common denominator here, what's common between 4 and 12 is going to be 12. Therefore, I have that x is going to be negative 1/12 minus, in order to change 4 into 12, I have to multiply by 3. So this is 3 times 3 all over 12. So this is negative 1/12 minus 9/12. So then we're left with, you're going to subtract across the top. So you've got 12 on the bottom, negative 1 minus 9. So negative 1 minus 9 is going to give you a negative 10/12, and then you need to remember you have to reduce. So when we're looking at 10/12, the easiest thing to do is divide out of 2. So when we do that, we find out that x is going to be negative 5/6, and that is everything you need. So that in a nutshell is everything you need to know about the beginnings of trying to add and combine and work with linear equations. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, remember to have fun, relax, and I'll see you next time.